Hello everybody, and welcome to the ASMR review show. First off, I would like to say thank you very much for the 1,000 subscribers, and to all those who have joined after that. I didn't think it was possible to get, more than 5 people interested, having made, 9 videos in a year or something like that. I don't know. But, in any case, thank you for your support. If people watch my videos, then, that lets me know that at least somebody cares about what I have to say, and that's more motivation for me to keep doing that. So, thank you. Also, slight note, you can't see them because the camera angle right now, but my dogs, they're just resting on my bed right over there. So if you hear any snoring, that's them. They're chilling out right now, and you should chill out and relax as well. So, as a wise British-born Australian once said, the best way to look forward to the next year is to be doing that rear end first, while squinting basically into the horizon of the previous year, or something along the lines of that. But the main point is that we're going to talk about my favorite movies that I saw in 2018. Now, I'm not a professional critic, and I don't really get out to the movies too much, and also all of those big, emotional dramas that'll end up winning all the awards, those haven't had their wide releases yet, so only the important critics have got to see those films. So I'm only going to do a top 5 just to try and keep it a little more exclusive. And what I'm also going to do to try and maybe spread this video out a little more is I'm going to do 2 other forms of a top 5 for this. The first top 5 I'm going to give you is my top 5 films that I want to see that I have not seen yet that came out in 2018. So I just have my phone right here, and I made a little list. So I will give you 5 that I've not seen yet. So these may have ended up in my top 5, but I haven't seen them yet. So, first one is Hereditary. This is a horror movie, came out earlier in the year, and I don't know too much about the story to it, and I like that. I want to go in as blind as possible, because I do think that horror movies, while a lot of the new ones have been pretty bad, there are some unique gems hidden in there, and so when I get to my top 5 movies, another one that I'm going to do for this list, I'll talk about another one, but Hereditary apparently is very good, very scary. It's been on a lot of other critics and channels' favorite lists that I respect, so I'm looking forward to seeing that one. Next one that I've not seen yet, which I should get around to because it is on Netflix, and that's Roma. I don't know too much about the plot of that one, but the main thing that I'm drawn to it is because it's directed by Alfonso Krull. I believe that's how you say his name, Krull. Alfonso Krull. Anyway, you know what I mean. But he's one of my favorite directors. He's made a lot of really great films. Not too frequently, but they've all been very good. Including Y Tu Mamá También, the best Harry Potter movie, Prisoner of Azkaban, Children of Men, which is maybe in my overall top 10 favorite films of all time. It's a fantastic science fiction movie. And Gravity, which, while it may not have been big on the story, was one of the biggest thrill rides I've ever had in a film, and that not many others can attest to. So he hasn't done one since Gravity, and that was, a little over 5 years ago. But now it looks like he's gone back to doing, sort of an indie-type drama film, So it's interesting that he can switch styles from blockbuster back to drama. And I'm looking forward to that, because he's a very good director. I like his style. Next is Bad Times at the El Royale. I've seen a lot of trailers for this, and I like the cast. Jeff Bridges, Dakota Johnson, who I think is underrated, Chris Hemsworth, and there's a couple other in there. I don't remember his name, but the guy who plays the main guy in Mad Men, Don Draper. Right? That's his name, right? So it's got a really good cast, and it's directed by Drew Goddard, who's the director for Cabin in the Woods, which was a really great, underrated horror spoof satire movie from a couple years ago. And to me, the vibe I get from it is a very Tarantino vibe. Hey, you. Relax. There. Do I get wins for putting puppies in a video? That gets me cuteness points, right? But Tarantino, obviously classic director, everyone's favorite. We like his style. And this movie kind of has that vibe to it, so I'm looking forward to it. And I mean, if you just look at the little trailer, the one that usually shows up on like YouTube ads, it's a quick clip of shirtless Chris Hemsworth dancing to Deep Purple's Hush. And I mean, that right there should be enough to get anyone sold, regardless of what you're into, because that clip right there, it's just, oh my, right? Okay, next one that I have not seen yet that I would like to see is The House That Jack Built, which is the new Lars von Trier film. Lars von Trier, he's an interesting director. I won't go into too many details of some of the scenes from his previous movies because it would not be relaxing to talk about at all. If you've seen any of his films, you know what I mean. And I'm not the biggest fan of his directing style because lately it feels like a lot of his characters are simply vessels for him to spout his ideology. And it can be a little distracting because sometimes it feels like the movie just stops just for him to basically look to the camera and say, hey, just so you know, this is what I think about this thing. But in a way, his overly pretentious style it's intriguing to me. And the fact that I watch his movies means I must care to some extent what he has to say. So, even if apparently this one is very overly done and pretentious and, trying to be, edgy, I'm still interested in it. I know the basic story is the life and times of this kid growing up to eventually be a full-fledged serial killer. And, I'm interested to see the portrayal and the acting. But it's probably one of those ones that I'll only watch once, as I do with most von Trier films. And last one I want to put on the top 5 movies I want to see list is Upgrade. This is a action movie which I've seen described as the best Venom movie of the year. It has everybody's favorite discount Tom Hardy, Logan Marshall Green, I believe is his name. And I don't know too much about the plot of this one as well, but I've seen a lot of good reviews for it, and my analysis of what I've seen seems to be that this guy has like some cybernetic enhancement or like a computer that can help control his body, and it leads to some really well done and well choreographed action scenes. Where like the camera movement is very mechanical and very like synchronized with his actions. So, I like action movies that have good style to them. So I think I'll probably enjoy that one. So those are my top 5 movies I have not seen yet that I would like to see. So maybe I'll get around to seeing them eventually. Hopefully I like them. I want to see them. So, next top 5 I'm going to do for this is the top 5 movies I saw in 2018 that were not released in 2018 and that I had not already seen. So basically, I'm giving a shout out to new movies for me that aren't necessarily new, if that makes sense. So, first one I'll talk about is, I mentioned that there are some good horror movies out there that are newer, and this one is A Cure for Wellness, which came out, I think, early 2016 or early 2017. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head, but it's a recent one. And it was directed by Gore Verbinski, who did the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So that tells you that this one will look fantastic, that it'll be very pretentious, probably too long, and, you know, maybe not as great as it could have been. But I really enjoyed it. I loved the style to A Cure for Wellness. It had such a great visual design. Everything was very well shot and crisp and clean, but also it had this very rugged physical look to it. Another one I can compare it to, which is another movie I saw this year that I really liked, is Crimson Peak. I kind of got this sort of gothic, classical vibe from those films. And I just loved the style to A Cure for Wellness. There's some really, really horrific scenes in the movie, which I won't spoil or go into detail. And, you know, it's one that I thought maybe, like, some of my friends who aren't that squeamish, that are squeamish could handle, but they couldn't, because some of the stuff that goes on is pretty intense. But the basic plot to it is Dane DeHaan. He plays this, like, businessman, insurance lawyer, collector type guy who has to go track down one of his associates at this, like, wellness center out in, like, I think, like, the Alps or some distant, remote European mountain range. And when he gets there, obviously stuff goes down. He gets trapped there because of an injury, so he can't escape, and there's weird creepy doctors, and this weird strange girl, and a bunch of shenanigans ensues. Maybe, like I said, is it a bit overlong? I think so. Didn't really have to be nearly 2.5 hours, but what it builds to is pretty great, and this is something I'll go into when I talk about another movie later on this list, but I like that it seems we're getting horror movies that are like European films. And what I mean by that is, like, studios in America, they're very hesitant to go all out on the messed up stuff, or the insanity, or the craziness, or the violence. And European studios are like, it's fine, it's whatever, you can put that out there, show it to the kids, we don't care. Like they're more laid back on that, because they're more about, like, the artist vision instead of, you know, making a profit. But yet lately I've seen a lot of big studios release movies that are not made for profit. Like A Cure for Wellness is definitely one of them, and Mother, that was another one. I loved that movie. I'd love to talk about that in another video or something, but that was definitely a European film, if you know what I mean. So, Cure for Wellness, it's a pretty great horror movie. So, next on my top 5 films that were new to me in 2018 is Samsara. This is a sort of documentary film, and I mean that because there's no narration or dialogue or anything like that. It's just images. And what this is the director He's done several other films like this, including Kronos and Baraka. And he gets a film crew to go around and just shoot a bunch of stuff around the world with IMAX cameras. And then it's all assembled into this, like, visual meditation and a journey around the planet. And I really like this because while there's no story or characters, it's really something you can get invested into, because you're sort of seeing what life is like around the planet for what it really is, not filtered through some kind of lens. Like, you really feel like you're getting to know all these places around the world. And, you know, for someone who hasn't traveled that much, a lot of times media is our only view into different ways of life. So I thought it was a really interesting movie, and I definitely recommend it. It's one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever seen, and the color is just, it's something else. Like, it's really interesting to think that all these places really exist around the world. And it's stuff you wouldn't really believe is actually there. So, it's a really good one. Not the most entertaining of films, but nonetheless interesting. So, next one we're going to talk about is Polytechnique. This is a dramatization of a school shooting that took place on a college campus in Quebec back in the late 80s. This event is what is remembered for the December 6th International Day of Remembrance for Violence Against Women. If you have heard of that date, it's based on that event, which this film Polytechnique is a dramatization of. And I really like the way that this film was done. It's directed by Denis Villeneuve, who is very popular now because of his more recent films like Blade Runner 2049 and Arrival and Sicario, Prisoners. And I really love his style. He's a great director. So this is one of his earlier films, so it was cool to see how his style was evolving. And I also like that it did a good job of making an important statement about the event while not seeming overly preachy, and also not over-representing or glorifying the killer. And what I mean by that is not to get too much into that side of things, but it's a common thing when big tragedy events happen. The person held responsible gets their face and their name plastered all over the news, and they get famous for it. And in a way, it can kind of encourage more people to do that. If you want to be heard, you just have to speak loud enough or do something crazy enough to get people to notice you. With this film, I felt avoided doing that. Like, the killer's name's never mentioned in the film, and I don't think that anyone would be sort of envious in that way. So, a very dark movie for sure, but very good. Next on my top 5 for this, I'm going to do something a little lighter, a little more lighthearted than horror movies and boring documentaries and dramatizations of tragedies. It's a religious satire, and that's Dogma. Dogma is a Kevin Smith film. Some of you may know he's a classic nerdy film school director from the 90s, alongside the likes of Tarantino or Robert Rodriguez. And it's a religious satire. The basic plot of it is that there are 2 angels who have been banished from heaven, but they found a loophole that will allow them to get back into heaven by passing through the gates of this church. But doing so would prove God wrong, thus negating all of existence. So our main group of characters have to stop these angels from doing that. So it's a pretty funny movie. There's a lot of great cameos in it. Jay and Silent Bob are in it because, of course, it's a 90s Kevin Smith film. They were all connected. And they're great. Always love them. And I like that it does satirize a lot of, commonly talked about elements of religion and all that. But I felt it was like, poking fun at legitimate critiques, not just trying to troll people and piss people off. And it still understood all of the aspects to it properly. Like, it wasn't just like an uneducated person's attempt at flinging rocks at someone. I'm pretty sure Kevin Smith, he's Catholic, or at least he was raised Catholic. So, he knows all this stuff with that. Which I do find it funny that there were mass protests against this film when it came out. You should look up on YouTube. There's a great story of Kevin Smith talking about how he disguised himself as a protester at a protest for his own film. It's a pretty great thing to watch. So yeah, Dogma was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. And last one I'm going to talk about for the top 5 films that were new to me in 2018 is Krull. Krull is a 1980s sci-fi fantasy action adventure film, and I never heard of it before until recently, and that was because Ready Player One, which came out this year, I enjoyed it. It was a good film. It's not on my main top 5 though. But I remember looking into all of the references and Easter eggs that there are in that film, and one was that they use a weapon called the glaive, which is a blade weapon from Krull. And I thought it was cool, and I was like, hey, there's this 80s film that I haven't heard of before, so I want to look into this. So I did, and it was a really fun, enjoyable movie. It might not be technically perfect. There are plot holes. Sometimes the acting's off, and the effects can be a little dated, but there's kind of a unique charm to it, that 80s nostalgia charm, which is interesting because I didn't grow up with this film, but I felt like I could have, if that makes sense. And you can say this for a lot of classic movies like Star Wars or Dune or something like that. Like, there's plot holes in those movies. Maybe some of the effects are dated. They're definitely not perfect, but there's a charm to it. You can sit down and watch it and just have a good time with it. And that's something I had with Krull. To give you a little bit of story about it, Krull is this planet where it's not Earth, but everyone's still human anyways, because that's 90% of science fiction. And this ancient evil force comes to the planet to destroy it. And how are they going to do that? The way they always do. The bad guy kidnaps the princess to hopefully force her to marry him. And the young, handsome, bold, heroic hero must step up to go on an epic quest of discovery and journey to save the day. And along the way, there's horses that run so fast they catch fire. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Alright. Here we go. This is what you've been waiting for. It is the top 5 films of 2018 that I actually saw. So, if something's not on here, maybe I didn't like it, maybe I did, it just missed out, maybe I haven't seen it yet. I already told you about some movies that I have not seen that I want to, that could have been on here. So, number 5. First of all, I'll just clarify that those other 2 top 5s were in no particular order, but this one is in order. because reasons. So, number 5 is Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody. This is the historical drama of the story of the band Queen, one of the greatest and most well-respected rock bands of all time. And while it is about the band as a whole, there is definitely more of an emphasis on their singer, Freddie Mercury, one of the greatest singers of all time. Now, I'll just sort of clarify this a bit, because this was a movie that I know when it came out, there was a bit of a negative reaction to, or as some people said, it was okay, and then I went and saw it and I loved it. So, I guess I'll sort of use this to talk about that, why I love it. I loved it because it was really cool seeing a historical dramatization of a band that I've loved for a long time. And part of watching this movie is you have to accept that it is a drama. It is not a documentary. So there are elements that have been hyped up or switched around or played up to make it dramatic and emotional. And that can pretty much be said for almost every other historical dramatization or based on a true story. So I didn't really let historical inaccuracies or some fictionalized events distract from the experience of watching the movie. And really, if I had one criticism for this film, it's just that I wish there was more of it. I feel that, especially for the first half of the movie, that it was flowing very fast, that we were kind of rushing from, and then they made this song, and then they played on TV, and then they made this album, and then people didn't like it, and then people loved it, and then they were famous, and that all happened within the span of like 5 minutes. So it felt kind of like jumping from highlight to highlight. So my only critique is that I wish there were more highlights that we saw. 2 of my favorite things about Queen that didn't get to see were their relationship with David Bowie and doing the Under Pressure song together, and Queen recording the soundtrack for Flash Gordon, which is another classic, cheesy 80s sci-fi fantasy action adventure movie. That seems to be a genre I really like. So, that's really my only critique of the film, is I wish there was more of it, and that it was a little jumping from place to place, but I liked it. The style, the direction, the acting was very on point. Rami Malek, who plays Freddie Mercury, he's probably going to get nominated for all the awards, and don't get me wrong, I loved him in the film, but the actor who plays Brian May, he is so good as Brian May. Like, I'm sure people have made this joke before, but the real Brian May, he's an astrophysicist, he's a doctor, and I swear that he just invented some time-traveling machine so he could, like, go back and, like, get himself from the past or something like that, because he looks really good as Brian May. So, yeah, I thought it was a really, really entertaining movie, and I won't spoil too much, but, I mean, Queen, their big moment was performing at the Live Aid concert, and the way that they shot the Live Aid concert for this film is so well done. It's a really great scene. So, yeah, I thought it was fantastic. Number 4 is Avengers Infinity War. I won't talk too much about this because I already did a full review of it, one of the few videos I actually made during the year. But I guess I'll just give a few updated thoughts now that I've seen the film multiple times. I still think that it holds up well from beginning to start. that all of the characters in it are well integrated and coordinated with each other, that all of the characters still felt like themselves. To me, I didn't feel like anyone did anything out of character. And it's perfectly paced. It never got boring for me. All the action scenes are very well done. I like that it feels like it can basically switch genres. An entire genre in a film, it can just switch on a dime from like emotional drama to like, fun, wacky comedy with like almost no transition, but it works because this has all been built up over time. Thanos was a fantastic villain, very intimidating, and yeah, it set up everything really perfectly for the next Avengers movie, which I'm really looking forward to that. Other than that, you can just go watch my other video to hear all my thoughts, because pretty much all has stayed the same. I don't think that the movie has gotten any worse for me or gotten any better. It's a really fantastic superhero movie. But I still like Civil War better. Number 3 is Suspiria, the 2018 version, the remake of the 1977 classic Italian horror film. Now, if there was one film that surprised me this much this year, it was Suspiria. Because remakes are usually never as good as the original, and especially horror remakes, they're usually pretty poor in quality. And I think that's just because, what's the point of doing a horror remake? You're not going to have the kills be as iconic because they've already happened in the original film. And, the only thing that they might try to do to up the ante is increase the body count or add more blood, and that doesn't always equal more scary. So, horror remakes are very tough to do. And when I saw the first trailer for this Suspiria remake, I was not interested. I didn't like that this film seemed to be missing the grandiose and alluring color scheme of the original. The original Suspiria is very beautifully shot, and unlike horror films, like everything's bright purple and pink and green, and you don't see that color scheme too much in movies, let alone horror films, which are usually dark and grimy. And the trailer for this one came out, and it was also dark and grimy. So I thought, what's the point? You're just going to show me the same film but without color. Why would I want to watch that? But what I like about this film is it's not really a remake. It's a reimagining, if that makes sense. Without spoiling too much, let me put it this way. The characters are the same as the characters in the original, but everything they do, the way they interact with other people and the way the events happen, is completely different. And I like that because this was a film where you don't have to see the original to like it, but if you have seen the original, you'll still probably like it because it's not just a retread. I had seen the original Suspiria, and the person I went with, they had not. And we both thought that this reimagining was very fantastic. It was dark, and it was pretty creepy. There were some very memorable kills and death sequences, which that's what you want in a horror movie. And I like that, similar to a couple other movies, like A Cure for Wellness, is that it had a European vibe to it, not just because it's set in Berlin, but because this is not a film that I could see major studios financing for profit, knowing that it would be controversial and not easy to market. And also in that same vibe where does it have something important to say about the political stance of Germany in the 70s with the Berlin Wall? Or is it all just window dressing so that we can show so much blood that we may as well have the Mortal Kombat theme over it, as Movie Bob once said? Who knows? But it's pretty entertaining and pretty awesome and pretty well done. So, yeah, I'm incredibly shocked that this turned out as well as it did. But to me, it was absolutely fantastic. And I cannot forget the fantastic score by Tom York from Radiohead. He did such a good job with creating a very creepy atmosphere for this movie. Number 2 is Mission Impossible Fallout. This was one that I was very much looking forward to. The trailers had me sold right from the style and the cast and the directing. I've loved all the Mission Impossible movies. Rogue Nation was fantastic, and to hear that they had the same team making this one, but bigger and betterer, I was absolutely hyped for it, and it did not disappoint. Mission Impossible Fallout, it's one of the best action movies I've ever seen. It is well directed and well shot, but it's also very well written, with enough twists and turns and backstabbing and complexity to it, not just to make it like a dumb romp. It's everything I could want from an action movie. Like there's the big helicopter scene you see in the trailers. That scene is probably the best helicopter sequence I've ever seen in a movie. I can't think off the top of my head if there was any other better than that. There's a motorcycle chase in this one through Paris, and it puts the motorcycle chase in Rogue Nation, which was already pretty good. It puts that one to shame. And now the only downside I can say to Mission Impossible Fallout is this movie was just so thrilling and entertaining that I don't know where they're going to go from here, how you could possibly one-up it. But I will say that the mustache was totally worth ruining Justice League for. Absolutely. And now we get to it, my number 1 favorite film of the year. The absolute cream of the crop, the best pick of all. It was, dramatic pause, comma, stalling tactic. It was Solo, A Star Wars Story. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm just joshing you. It was actually Black Panther. No. Once again, gotcha. Just joshing you. No, actually, it was Annihilation. This movie absolutely floored me when I saw it. I was in shock by the end of it, and I was really looking forward to it because it was directed by Alex Garland, who did Ex Machina, one of the best sci-fi movies ever, and I loved the vibe that I was getting from the story of this movie. To me, it was like, one part H.P. Lovecraft, one part Kubrick, one part Carpenter, and one part Tarkovsky, all mixed into this weird amalgamation of a bunch of different aspects of science fiction. I love a good science fiction movie, and Annihilation absolutely excelled at this. And my only hope is that this movie still gets remembered, because unfortunately it only got a theatrical release in North America and China, and everywhere else it was a direct to Netflix movie, which to me is kind of the kiss of death new version of direct to DVD. So I'm not sure, really how well this movie did, or if the writers and the directors are going to have the funding to do something else afterwards, or if it's going to be remembered by a lot of people, because I didn't really see this around on too many other top picks of the year. Just kind of like, oh yeah, it was good, it was all right. But for me, this movie, excelled at everything I want a science fiction movie to do. It had taking some concepts of science, but, fictionalizing them, science fiction. It had a interesting world and set of characters set up. It was well shot, well directed, kept me interested throughout, and it occasionally randomly went into some really terrifying body horror sequences. I'd like to think that I'm pretty strong-willed when it comes to gross moments in movies, because I'm so desensitized to violence. But there was one scene, sort of in the middle of Annihilation, where these characters are watching some footage on an old camera, and I was legit trying not to look away, and that doesn't happen that often. And I won't spoil this movie because you should all go see it, but the third act, the finale of this film, was jaw-droppingly beautiful and so interesting, and it made me think just about what was occurring. And as soon as the movie was over, I wanted to watch it again. And as soon as it was available on Netflix, I went and I watched it again, and I got all my friends together so we could watch it, because this is one that I had to share with people. I'm saying, I love my... Let me back up a bit. I know this is definitely personal bias on this one, and that's okay. I'm not afraid to admit it. But I like good science fiction films. I like films with ideas. I like films that can mix across different genres or styles. And Annihilation was all of those things for me. And that's why, despite the fact that some other films came pretty close to surpassing it, that I didn't even have to think about it. It was no contest at all. That Annihilation, even though it came out early in the year, I knew that it's probably going to stay my number one for the year. Usually it's a science fiction film, because again, I am biased. But yeah, it was pretty awesome, pretty fantastic. Anyway, that's all the films I have to talk about for this video. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to give me your top 5 movies of the year in the comments, and maybe give me some other ones that I missed out. Again, I did tell you my top 5 that I wanted to see that I haven't yet, and there's probably a couple others there that I've not gotten around to. And of course, now that it's going to be February and January, that's when all the real contenders for the Best Picture come out, because the awards season is annoying. It's very, very difficult to do these things properly. So, yeah. And of course, thank you very much for 1,000 subscribers. I didn't think we could do it, but we did. So, like, comment, subscribe, and let's see if we can get to 1,068. Because reasons. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed that, and have a good night.